Hello, Union Chapel family, and welcome to the 12 Days of Christmas Read-Alouds. I am Miss Danyelle Hagans, a third grade teacher here at Union Chapel School. And first of all, I want to tell you how much we miss you. We miss seeing you in person and hope that everyone and your families are doing well. And we can't wait till we're back together again. The book that I have chose to read is called Auntie Claus. And before I read it, I would like to tell you why I chose this book. I've had this book for many years, and I bought it simply because of the title. When my nephews were small, and even to this day, they call me Auntie. So when I saw this book, I knew that I had to have it to read at Christmas time. And over the years, it has absolutely become one of my favorites. My nephews are grown now, but every time I read this book, I think of them. And that's what good books do, boys and girls. They help you make personal connections. So I hope you like this one as much as I do. This is called Auntie Claus by Elise Primavera. The Kringle family lived high atop the luxurious Bing Cherry Hotel in New York City, and they loved Christmas. They kept a Christmas tree up all year round. Mr. Kringle was president of the renowned Jingle Bell Company. Mrs. Kringle owned the fabulous Mistletoe to Nail Salon over on 56th and 5th. They had even named their young son after you-know-who. Sophie and her little brother had everything, but if you asked, was it enough? No, they would say. Was it enough to have their own private soda fountain? No, they would shake their heads back and forth. Or clothes and books galore? No, they would scream. It had been suggested by their great aunt, Auntie Claus, that maybe Sophie and her little brother were given too many presents. You can never have too many presents, sniffed Sophie. That's my motto. Yes, everyone in the Kringle family loved Christmas, but no one loved it more than Auntie Claus. Auntie Claus lived at the Bing as well, penthouse 25C. Every afternoon, Sophie was summoned there for tea. Each day, Auntie Claus would instruct Sophie on a different topic. One day, it might be Christmas trees. Always pick a nice full one, darling, with springy needles. And another day, decorating. You must drape the garland, darling, one strand at a time. You must never throw it on. After they finished tea, Auntie Claus would close with these words of wisdom. And darling, always remember my first and final rule. Whether it's birthdays, Christmas, or Halloween, it is far better to give than to receive. Sophie wondered about her great aunt a lot. She's so mysterioso, Sophie thought, and this was true. There were many strange goings on up in penthouse 25C. Most people considered Auntie Claus just another eccentric New Yorker, but Sophie knew that there was more to her than met the eye. For instance, what was that diamond key that always hung from a silver ribbon around her neck? Oh, just a little costume jewelry, darling, her great aunt would say, then quickly change the subject. Why did Auntie Claus leave every year right after Halloween and not return until Valentine's Day? Oh, it's a business trip, darling, and she'd change the subject again. Where does she go? Sophie wanted to know. Once again, it was Halloween, and Auntie Claus announced, "Please remember, in 1 week, I'm off on my annual business trip." "What kind of business are you in anyway?" Sophie asked. "Oh, that, darling, is for me to know and you to find out." And when she said it, Auntie Claus had a twinkle in her eye. That's exactly what I intend to do, Sophie thought. This year I have a plan. I'll stow away. Sophie had made up her mind. As she was leaving, Sophie said, "I'm going on a business trip with Auntie Claus." "Oh, marvelous news, darling. Be home in time for Christmas and be a good girl," said her mother. "Take your mittens," said her father. "I'm going," said her little brother. "No, you're not," said Sophie. "I can if I want to," he said. "You cannot," she said. "Can't," he cried. "Cannot," she yelled. Sophie could hear his ear-splitting scream starting to fade as she headed out the door. Sophie tiptoed into Auntie Claus's apartment. There were many boxes and trunks waiting to go. Choosing the largest, Sophie pushed aside the capes and furs and wriggled inside. Quietly, she made a little peephole in the cardboard so she could see everything that was going on. Auntie Claus entered the room. She removed the diamond key that hung from the ribbon around her neck. Then she placed the key into the lock of her old elevator. The door slid open. The boxes and trunks were loaded. The door slid shut. Like this. The elevator shot up in the air and out into space. They were going up, up, up. Minutes, an hour passed, and they were still going up. Sophie could feel it was getting colder and colder. From her little peephole, she could see stars zipping by. And was that snow? We can't possibly be in New York any longer, Sophie thought. The elevator landed with a thunk, tipping over Sophie's box. She could no longer see, but she thought she heard cheers. The sound soon faded until all became completely silent. Thinking it was safe, she climbed out of the box. Where am I? Sophie thought. You must be the new elf, a little man said. Yeah, that's it, said Sophie. I'm the new elf. Who are you? I'm Mr. Pudding, he said. Oh dear, you just broke elf rule number 3. What do you mean? Asked Sophie. And he pulled a worn green and red book from his pocket. On the cover it read, Elf Rules and Vital Information, and he pointed to the section marked Dress Code. Sophie read out loud, always look neat, always look snappy. A well-dressed elf always feels happy. Follow me, he said, and trotted off into the darkness. Where are we going? Asked Sophie. Hurry, hurry, Mr. Pudding called over his shoulder. Only 48 days left. Mr. Pudding put Sophie right to work in the mailroom. It seemed to her as good a place to start as any for her search. Where was Auntie Claus, and what was she doing here? For days, Sophie lived among the elves and did her best to blend in. She slept on a cot in the elf dormitory. She ate her meals in the cafeteria. No one suspected a thing. Every day, Mr. Elf appeared. Hello, Elf Sophie, settling in? He asked. The uniform's so itchy, and I'm working so long, said Sophie. It's hard. Oh dear, said Mr. Pudding, and he pulled out the green and red book from his pocket. Elf rule number 2, Mr. Pudding recited. An elf's work is never done, but hard work never hurt anyone. Rules, schmooze, thought Sophie. For weeks, Sophie looked high and low for Auntie Claus, but now it was almost Christmas Eve, and she had turned up nothing. Sophie was worried. If she didn't find Auntie Claus, how would she get home? And if she didn't get home, how would she get her Christmas presents? Then Mr. Pudding appeared. Hello, Elf Sophie, he said. Good news. You have excelled in the mailroom, and now you're going to package wrapping. After that, we're going to pitch in and get the sleigh packed. I'm not going to package wrap it, and I'm not going to pack a sleigh. I'm going home, Sophie yelled. I have to get my... But before she could finish, Santa's voice interrupted over the PA system. Santa. Here we go again. It's that time of year again. His voice boomed. And I was hoping one of you would volunteer to go to the coal mines and pick up the BB&G list. Sophie whispered to Mr. Puddin. What's the BB&G list? BB&G list, he shivered. Don't you know? That's the bad boys and girls list. Any boy or girl on that list goes without presents, or worse, for Christmas. Sophie swallowed hard. She thought. Mr. Puddin continued. Only the bravest of elves volunteers for that awful job. Yes, a brave elf, thought Sophie, or a girl who thinks her name is on the list. She raised her hand high. I'll go, Sophie said. Oh dear, said Mr. Puddin. As Sophie made her way toward the coal mines, she could hear the chanting of the BB&G elves. Spoiled brats and crying babies, wine babies, and all the ones who don't believe. Here's some coal, here's some gunk. Fill a stocking that smells like skunk. Urgh. Sophie kept going down, 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 and it kept getting darker and darker. Oh, Lord, the bad boys and girls list. Finally, she reached the very bottom, and there it was. Sophie looked everywhere for her name, but it wasn't her name she saw on the list. It was Mr. Antonio's. Oh my, no, not Mr. Antonio, I got you. It's my little brat of a brother, she cried. Chris is on the bad boys and girls list. Well, she thought, once she got past the shock of it, they do have a point. But then she pictured the two of them on Christmas morning, and there she would be with lots of presents for her and nothing for her brother. And Christmas, well, it was his favorite day of the year. He would be there with a stinky stocking filled with coal and gunk. Oh, he'll be so disappointed and so sad, Sophie said. So what did she do? She erased his name, but now there was a telltale gap. There's only one thing to do. Now we really got to put Mr. Antonio's name. No, Sophie took a deep breath and wrote her name. The ink wasn't even dry on the page when some kind of really strong magic happened. And right before her eyes, the list, the BB&G elves, and the coal mines vanished. And Sophie was whirling around and around, hurling through the air in a blur of Christmas red and green. Was she up? Was she down? I can't even tell. Sophie was standing on the stage in the grand ballroom. A clock struck midnight. Santa began to speak. She's always on time. She always works harder than anyone I know, including me. In short, she does things right and I'd be lost without her. Let's give a big round of applause for my sister. The curtain opened. Auntie Claus? Sophie shouted. Auntie Claus! Everybody cheered. Hooray for Auntie Claus! Auntie. Turning to Sophie, Auntie Claus winked and said, Come along, darling. You got to get home for Christmas. So now we just found out Auntie Claus's secret. She is Santa Claus's sister. Sophie was about to climb onto the sleigh when Mr. Pudding appeared. He was waving the green and red book in the air. Oh dear, he cried. Auntie Claus, Sophie can't leave until she knows the final rule. See, it says right here under departing procedures. The reindeer stomped. They were restless as if to say, let's go. Sophie knows the first and final rule, Mr. Pudding, Auntie Claus said. I do, asked Sophie. You do. Now hop onto the sleigh and be a good girl. Sophie jumped onto the sleigh and it rose up into the sky. Goodbye, goodbye, she called. She could barely hear her aunt's voice anymore over the wind and the snow. I knew you had it in you. Merry Christmas, darling. The sleigh picked up speed. Ho, 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 Santa laughed as the stars whizzed by. Sophie closed her eyes. Her face was stinging from the cold. And when Sophie opened her eyes again, she could hardly believe she was in her own bed. She ran down the stairs toward the living room. Please let him have some presents. Please let him have some presents, she kept whispering to herself. And under the tree was her little brother. His cheeks were red, his eyes were sparkling, his belly was shaking with laughter. Merry Christmas, Sophie, he bellowed. Merry Christmas, Chris, Sophie said with relief. It was then she realized Auntie Claus is right. I do know the first and final rule. And she said it to herself. It is far better to give than to receive. There's something for you, her mother and father said proudly. They handed Sophie a tiny box with a card. Inside was a diamond key hanging from a red ribbon. It's from Auntie Claus, Sophie said. Where is Auntie Claus? Chris piped up. Oh, she's on a business trip, darling, Sophie said, and she smiled mysteriously. And then something occurred to Chris. Auntie Claus is never here on Christmas, he said. What kind of business is she in? That's something for me to know and you to find out, Sophie said to her butterball of a brother. And someday he would find out. But that's another story. And inside Sophie's box, boys and girls, look what she got. A key on a string, just like Auntie Claus would wear around her neck. And here's the note that Auntie Claus left. For my dear niece Sophie, you really are a chip off the old block. Love, Auntie Claus. P.S. I'll be expecting you for tea on Valentine's Day, darling. And that's the end of Auntie Claus, boys and girls. And I hope you can tell why this is one of my absolute favorites that I read every year to my boys and girls. And even though we're not together, we can still read it virtually. And so if you think I have done a good job reading this book, I want you to talk to Mr. Antonio about letting me have every year from Halloween to Valentine's Day off as well. So let's get that petition going. So boys and girls, please, please, please have a Merry Christmas. Stay safe, stay well, and I will see everyone when we return to school. Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.